Hey everyone, thank you for tuning into the Shut Up or Talk Up Wellness Lifestyle brand, where we focus on connecting wellness as a wellness connector. And how do we do that? We encourage individuals to have uncomfortable conversations about mental health, emotional health, and physical health. And we also provide wellness events and we do wellness life coaching. However, we are focusing on our health talk. We have had the honor of speaking to health and wellness contributors all over the world, literally. And today we have the honor of speaking to Jacqueline Dawson, licensed therapist. Yes, as you can see, she's happy. How you doing, Jacqueline?
I am happy. How are you? Thank you for
Yes,
having me.
yes. I feel like I should have like the Pharrell happy song in, but I don't want to get in trouble playing anybody's song.
No, right? I know.
But thank you so much for
Of
taking the
course.
time to have this conversation with us. And just to get right into the thick of things, can you tell our audience, what your role is as a therapist and how did you end up in that profession and what it means to you?
Absolutely. So thank you for having me. So yes, I am a licensed mental health therapist in South Florida. I have been in the field for about 20 years. It's been some time. It's been some time. Yes. So I started off, probably high school taking the random elective psychology class, totally by accident, needed some credits to finish up before graduation. Ended up in psychology and loved it and kind of stuck with it. Went to college, went to FAU in Boca and did my psychology degree in undergrad. I did a minor in criminal justice and kind of wanted to incorporate some kind of law, criminal background stuff because I just had an interest in that as well. So always kind of kept that as an interest in the back of my mind. Went to Nova, did my master's in mental health counseling, and been doing it ever since. So I've had a variety of experience working in the jails and doing some prison work and working in nonprofits and schools and that sort of thing. So I've been in the field in a variety of capacities for some time now, and I just love to be able to help others, and that's why I'm still here, able to kind of support people through their mental health and substance abuse. I do addiction stuff as well, to help people get through that for themselves.
Okay, that's definitely awesome. And so you have a 20-year experience. You have 20 years experience,
Yes.
and now. So this is very interesting because you know I'm excited about what the mental health, like the people being, they're concerned about it, and men and
Mm-hmm.
women, and all these opportunities to share insight and to, connect and so forth. But you have a unique position because you actually seen it when no, it wasn't a buzzword.
Yeah.
What is your experience, or what can you say the differences between 20 years ago and now? Whether, when it comes to like patient care, or when it comes to the trend of even using the
Yeah.
term mental health.
So it's a good question because when I started, in 2002, it really has been 20 years, right? Um, and it's still a stigma, right, Marley? I mean, it's still there. That still hasn't changed as far as people are still afraid sometimes and hush hush about getting mental health help. But it's definitely talking about more, like you mentioned, the buzzword. And I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate people are talking about, I have a therapist. They're no longer hiding it as much, right? Because yes, you've gotten to the field and people were afraid to even admit that they were coming to therapy, they were getting support. And now you watch the average TV show, they have a therapist on the show, right? Or people are rapping about their therapist and their music, and it's everywhere now. And so, you think it's overkill, but I never think it will be. I think it's definitely important to have these conversations, and it's important for us to normalize. It's okay to need support. It's okay that I might have a mental health struggle. It's okay for me to admit that I need help and get that. And so I have seen it progress in a good way in that sense. But we're still not there yet. I still think we have a long way to go for us to be like, yeah, I see a therapist, and I go to my dentist, and I go to my doctor, like just normal, like it's part of my health,
Yeah.
right? And I'm looking forward to us getting to that point. But we're moving along slowly to
Okay,
get
well,
there.
that's good. I mean,
Yeah.
and so another thing I wanted to ask, because I'm so curious, you know, 20 years ago, men being, I guess, interested in mental health versus 2022? What can you tell me 20 years ago? What have you experienced with men wanting to versus today?
Yeah, well, you know what? I actually have a different experience because one of my first jobs, I was working in the jails. And working in the jails, I ran a men's group. I ran a men's program.
Awesome.
So, and it was a lot of substance abuse, don't get me wrong, but we definitely touched on mental health as well. And so, working in that environment, I had 72 men every day that I worked with. And so, I come from a different world that I actually saw men who maybe didn't choose to be there. It was jail, don't get me wrong, right? But since they were there, they were getting support and getting the help. So I was exposed to a lot more people that in that way that probably needed help more than the average man out in the world, right? As I've gone out of that environment and worked other places in private practices and wherever else I've been all over the years, there's still a huge stigma attached to men, even admitting that they need help, right? And we can probably go into a way deeper conversation about why that is. But they are coming out a little bit more. But especially when you talk about the Black men, or if you happen to be a Caribbean man, it's even worse because the idea of admitting that there's something wrong or you're crazy or whatever these words, these terms that we come up with, it's a really tough. So when you do see men asking for help, it's good to see, and also on the opposite side, we don't have enough male therapists either. I'll tell you that. But it is something that's good to see out there, that men can see other men who might be able to support them if they don't want to go to a woman as well.
Yes. And what do you think about children? How has mental health and especially during the pandemic, how has
Yeah.
mental health has showed up more prevalent in the babies,
Yeah.
in adolescent, in age 3 and up? Do you have any experience? Have you heard anything
Yeah,
about that?
absolutely. I don't work with children anymore, but I definitely have had, children in the past and work with them. I will say that sadly, the rates of suicide have gone up in adolescence, especially around the ages of 14 and 15, with teenagers. So it's scary. It really is scary, especially during the pandemic. A lot of people, you have to remember that when it comes to school, for example, sometimes school is the escape, right? If life at home isn't great for whatever reason, school becomes their outlet. School becomes their safe space. And so the fact that we were home for so long, sometimes in not the best environments for some of these kids, they didn't fare so well. Let's put it that way, right? The good thing is there are a lot of mental health organizations out there. There are a lot of therapists who see children. And again, I think it's just normalizing the conversation and encouraging people to get help. And even as parents, I am a parent, by the way, even as a parent, to see those signs and just say, something's not okay. Let me get support. Let me get help if my kid isn't doing well, and not waiting until, unfortunately, they're suicidal or something terrible is happening. I think it's just across the board is us talking about it and letting our children have a space to say, hey, I don't feel great today, and having those dialogues with them. Even if they are children, they still have feelings and they still need to be heard.
Right. What are what are some tips you can share with parents on how to even what to say? Like, how do you initiate the conversation?
I think it starts with having an open dialogue constantly, right? You don't go to somebody when something is wrong. If my child feels comfortable telling me, when something is wrong generally, mommy, something's not right today, then he will also feel comfortable when something is really not good, right? I have a
Right.
12-year-old, almost a teenager, so I can certainly say this from experience, is having the open communication to let him talk when he wants to talk, right? Now he's a 12-year-old, so he wants to play his video games and talk to his friends, and I get that too, but
Right.
he does know that there's an open space anytime where he can come to mommy and daddy, and have those conversations and open up to us and say, hey, this is what's going on for us. But I think we have to allow kids to be kids and allow them to have emotions, allow them to talk about some things, and also allow them their space, right? So kids aren't always going to be freely open up. They want to be in their video games. You still got to pay attention to what they're watching and what they're reading and what they're, doing on social media, and that'll give you some signs as well. But it's really just opening up conversations, staying in touch with their teachers, of course, in their schools, if anything's wrong in school. They're counseled at schools too, you know what I mean? But you have to encourage them to feel that that's okay to go to a counselor if you don't want to go home or don't want to go to a therapist in the community. That most schools, especially where I'm in Broward County, most schools do have therapists on site or assigned to the schools.
And so you did mention the council within school. I do want to kind of shift the just kind of go next door on a slightly different topic, but even discussing counseling. Do you think that there is a difference between, it's maybe touchy, but this is a shut up talk about wellness,
of course.
We have a comfortable conversation. Do you think that for engaged couples that are participating in marriage, do you think that their counseling within the church is different from going to an actual therapist? And this by no means is shunning or however one or the other. But I'm curious. I want to know, you know, should a new couple go to, you know, their pastor or their church counseling session? And also, is there a difference with having a therapist? You know, are there things that the therapist may touch that maybe the counselor or your minister or your pastor may not touch, right? Do you need to have that support system for both? And I am not a licensed therapist. That's not my background. And that's why we have Jacqueline here. That's go ahead.
I love that question though, because you know, you said it's uncomfortable. It's not uncomfortable for us, but it's reality, right? But people are sometimes stuck in that mentality that you can't, you know, if you go into the church, you can't see a therapist outside of that. And so my answer to you is it depends, right? I think as churches see clients, couples, whoever they're seeing for whatever reason, I think they have to recognize when they can't do anymore. Let's put it that way, right? So if I am a pastor, and I want to be clear, I'm not a pastor. I've never been to a pastor for counseling. So I want to be clear about, you know, what I'm saying out loud as well. However, if a pastor is coaching or doing therapy, whatever their, you know, term is for a couple, and it seems like there's something more intense than they can handle, I think churches have to be honest about that conversation and say, hey, you know what? Here's our list of therapists that we connect with and collaborate with. I hope that's happening. That should be happening, right? Here's some people that I think you have to go to for clinical reasons beyond what I can do for you, right? So if everything is great and it's just like, hey, we're doing our regular premarital stuff before we, you know, jump the broom, that's fine. And I'm here. I'm definitely not opposed to people going to church and getting where they need to go. I'm definitely a believer as well. However, I think there's room for both. And I think you have to be very clear with that. And you know, people say you can have Jesus and the therapist, right? If you believe in Jesus, if that's what you do, you know, you can have both. It's okay to have both, and people have to. But I think the churches have to be honest about that, what their role is. And when it comes to a point where it's beyond their knowledge or their experience or their training, absolutely their expertise, then it's time to reach out to the therapist that might actually be already in your church anyway, or you have a good network of therapists that you can connect with and say, hey, listen, this is beyond my scope. That's yours. Here's their information, or encourage them to call themselves, you know?
And you know, even to be in a space to hold yourself accountable and to know your limits and to know your boundaries and to understand the boundaries within you, the ethical, right?
Absolutely.
Ethical, guidelines, just integrity. I think prior to us having this conversation, we normally do a warm up. Jacqueline and I did a warm up, just kind of touching base. And I explained to her that though I have been life coaching for quite some years now, right? Before you know, just quite some time, I am a life coach that in the event where I have a client that is showing signs or I think need assistance in an area that I am not licensed to assist with, right? As a life coach, we can have very similar conversations, right? But we should not cross medication zone, right? We should not cross or give advice, you know, think, when it gets like suicidal,
Yeah.
harm, self, it's good that we can have certain conversations, but the intro to the conversation, and then we should be able to be that source to guide them to a therapist. That's how I operate. That's how
And
we
we
operate.
have to know our role. I think there's room for all of us. There's room for life coaches, room for therapists, room for the pastors, and you can coexist and help
Yes.
people to heal and do well. But we have to know our lane. And even as a therapist, though, Marla, I will say this: there are certain things and maybe certain expertise that I don't have. And so if a client comes to me with whatever the thing is, right? You mentioned couples, for example. I don't see couples. Nothing against them. That's not
Right.
my thing, right? But I
Mhm.
have great couples therapists who I know who are trained and do really well with that population, who I'm quick to refer to. So if a couple comes to me and say, "Hey, I want to do couples counseling with you," I'm sorry, that's not my lane. But if you come to me for something else that I can help you with, I'm gonna help you. But I'm gonna recognize that's not my scope. Let
Right.
me find the best person for you. And that's the same thing with
Yes.
the life coach, same thing with the pastor. I think we
Yes.
got to be clear about,
Yeah.
what we do and what we
Mhm.
don't do.
Yes, because I think essentially now that it's a trend to feel like I can do it all, I can, and for me, I don't want to do it all.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I need time for me, right?
Yeah.
So me portraying that I can do it all, it's only going to take up more time for my self time, my self care, right? And no, I
Hmm.
cannot do it all. But the things I can do, I did do it very well, and I take
Absolutely.
pride in it.
Yeah.
And so with that, even knowing when to say, hey, I'm a pastor, and I'm doing the marriage counseling.
Hmm.
Sometimes even as human, we have to take our ego out of it, right? And we also have to take um that feeling of, what if they think I'm inadequate, right? Or I should know
Hmm.
how to do this, right?
Yeah.
Or sometimes we want the money. Not, and I'm not talking about the pastor, right? I'm just talking about in general.
In general,
We have
absolutely.
life coaches that just want to, go, and that's fine, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just saying how we operate here on this platform, right?
Hmm.
I am more eager to help people with setting, right? And
Yeah.
have conversation, confidential conversation. And I'm not eager to just get a client based off the money, right?
Right.
Because that's, and me just trying to get you based off the money, and me trying to will you in and let you know that I can, and even if there's something that I am qualified for, and I am qualified to do, in the
Hmm.
event where I feel as though I'm overbooked, I don't have the time, I
Yeah.
need my own mental capacity, I have a list of other life coaches that I refer my
Exactly.
clients to.
Exactly.
You have to create a support system, because though we are the helpers, right, or the givers, or however you want to explain it,
Hmm.
still need a support system.
Absolutely. And we do a disservice to clients, I think, when we don't do that. We don't recognize, okay, this is beyond my scope, or I have too many clients, or I don't have enough time. Because now I'm feeling, when you feel like your work becomes a chore, right? If I have too many clients on my caseload and I can't do it, and I take another one, by the time I get to you, I'm tired, I'm drained. I'm not even giving you my full energy anymore because I don't have time, or I'm
Right,
tired, whatever that is for you. And it's not fair to the client either. So if
right,
I'm with you 100% about networking, about people, knowing the right people to call. And I listen, like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years, so I know a lot of therapists.
yeah,
And I'm quick to call one of them. Listen, I
yeah.
have a client for you.
You
Quick
you made
to
a
send a quick email.
you made a valid point earlier. You are a therapist, but and just like when people think about doctors, people say, "Oh, you're a doctor, so you know how to fix my heart," and they're like, hold on, I'm a chiropractor."
Exactly.
Okay, hold on, no, I'm a pediatrician. No, you got to go to a
Absolutely.
cardiologist. And I think
Yeah.
understanding that, I think the education of the different layers, right, and the
Hmm.
specialties. And one of the conversations that we've had with an endocrinologist. I am so I'm just how endocrinologists are so important with our hormones
Hmm.
and everything. And
Hmm.
I've been trying to have a lot of neurologists and have these conversations. And they say, like, a lot of people don't know about them until they reach in their 30s and
Mm.
40s, when they realize,
Yeah.
oh, it's my hormones, right? And
Yeah.
can you tell us the difference, I guess, the different specialties within therapy or therapists, or, you know, the one that,
Well, sure. I mean, there's so many, but I will
well,
say
a
that
few.
people, yeah, people kind of specialize in different things, right? So some people will only see children, for example. Some people, like, that's their specialty. They see the kids, the young ones. They might do some play therapy with the 3-year-olds and, you know, about those ages. They might do some other work with teenagers, for example. Some people only see adults, right? And that's just their whatever reason they do that, right? And of course, within therapy, there's so many different techniques and trainings, and some people do a lot of trauma work, for example, and there's different modes of training for that and treatment for that as well. Some people might kind of lean more towards addiction stuff, which is actually what I do. And I've worked in treatment centers and all that for many years. That's kind of where I ended up going with my stuff. So it's hard to say. I mean, there's so many different things, but I think it starts with identifying with what kind of clients you want to see and what kind of clients you do your best work with, and then tailoring, you know, you're offering your services to them. And when it's not your thing, like I mentioned the couples thing, then finding somebody who can do that role, you know. And I do a lot of crisis work and a lot of employee assistance, kind of, that's kind of where my lane. So a lot of the crisis and the, you know, the brief support sometimes and stuff, you know, recent trauma, recent grief. That's the kind of work that I do. But again, there's so many, and I think if a client is looking for a therapist, it's important for them to see what the therapist does. And usually if they have a website or some kind of psychology profile that you can look up and see, you know, what their background is, right?
Yeah.
Don't come to me for something that I've never been trained in. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense
And then,
to me
and then
or you as a
also,
client.
and also not, you know, the general population, the general public, they don't understand there's different layers. So they're like, aren't you a therapist? You can fix
And
my
that's where the
back.
therapist has to say, yes, but.
But yes. So
You know?
I do want to dabble into, you mentioned grief. And how do you think the African American community handles grief? I know that was a loaded question. I just kind of, you know, you can shut up when you can talk up. You can shut up. You like, girl, probably. No, but honestly, and I'm gonna segue it by sharing my own experience. I have been studying grief. So my father's physical has left us about 2 years now, and his physical, and I really had to study grief because we were never taught, right? Grief is also something that it's more like it could be a hush hush thing, or it could be, because even adults don't know how to process it, right? And so they don't know how to process, they don't know how to share it to the children. And when my father passed, I had to go and study grief. I had to understand grief, and there was some guilt, you know, and I had to strip myself of that guilt I had, because wait a minute, you know, and then also studying grief has allowed me to make sure that I show up as myself, right? Make sure that I know that my last interaction with people, or the people that I deem supportive, or if I just send a random text, or hey, how you doing?
Yeah,
You know,
just checking on people. Yeah.
Yeah, because at least my last experience, and if I wasn't there, at least I know I did try my best to engage, and or my last experience. Dealing with grief has rocked me inside out, like, whoa, like, you know. And I like I said, I've been studying it a whole lot. I actually would do a big piece on grief. And my parents are from Jamaica, and so they were never taught, so they never taught us, right? You know, and my mom, she's so optimistic. She's always been the one to say our flesh is gonna leave us, but you know, she's one of those people that this is a part of life.
Yeah.
And I always ask myself, if we know that death, the physical shedding, is part of our life, why does it always feel so brand new? Why does that pain always feel so brand new and hit so hard? That's the one thing that is promised, really, right? And I don't mean to get to, however, but this is the Shut Up or Talk Up.
Of course.
So It's,
Yeah.
and I had to ask myself, why is this, and I had to strip the layers. Okay, this is why connection. This is why shame, guilt, or feeling like I should have did this, or maybe that, or feeling like
Hmm.
that person didn't live their life the way I think they should have lived their life, or
Right.
it's just so much with it. And as a therapist, and I know you mentioned something about grief.
Hmm.
I know my initial question was, how do you think Black Americans or African
Yeah.
Americans deal with grief? And what's your
So absolutely. So it's interesting because you're talking about kind of two different things, right? So I'm hearing Black American, I'm hearing Caribbean. My parents are Jamaican too, by the way. So I
Hey,
certainly know
okay,
the
all right,
know the upbringing and know it well. And so I think from a therapist standpoint, I'll say this. We still have to remember what the client believes when we're talking about grief, right? Because you and I might say, flesh and gone this way and gone to heaven and all these things that we believe because we've been taught or whatever. And our belief may not necessarily be what the client believes. So it's very important for us to still sit back and say, okay, this person is no longer here. Tell me about that for you, right? Because if they don't believe in heaven, hell, whatever else is out there, then our conversation is going to change a little bit, right? It's going to certainly change about what we're saying with the client. And so I think it's important for us to recognize, no matter what the person looks like, what their belief system is coming into therapy. And so grief is the same way, right? And so yes, they're going to talk about the status of grief and how, but going back to one of your comments, it's loss, right? So we're missing somebody who's no longer with us. So whether it's a selfish thing, whether it's just, there's a missing piece in our family, there's so many ways that we can kind of address that. But I think the biggest thing for us in this conversation is to recognize, okay, when is this average grief and when is this kind of a regular feeling? And when is it to a point that I'm 2 years later, I'm depressed and can't get out of bed and I won't come out, out of my house. I need support. I need help, right? Grief, there's no time frame, by the way. There's no time frame on grief, and I'm not here to tell anybody there is.
there's no
You're gonna have
structure.
there's no structure. You're gonna have
It's
memories.
not linear.
You're gonna have moments, and you're gonna have all these things that come up for you, up and down, right? But Marley, there's a difference between you being able to move forward, of your family members and still function,
Right.
right? And that's what we have to kind of get to a point. Now, am I still functioning after I've lost this person in my life, or have I become this person who can't get out
And
the
not
house
feeling
anymore?
guilty for functioning. That's the big thing.
Absolutely, yeah. But I think in general, as a therapist, we got to kind of figure out what this means for them, what this means as far as a person being gone, what are their beliefs surrounding death, and all of that kind of has to come into play before we can kind of jump in with our own oh, they're in heaven looking down, what if they don't believe in that, what,
Right.
you know what I mean? So it's you got to be very careful. Even when we're offering condolences to people, sometimes we got to be careful what we're saying, because they don't have to necessarily believe what we believe. And so we're over here talking about, oh, they're your angel now, and yeah, that might be my belief, but what if you don't believe that? And so now
That's
you're
so
looking at me I'm sorry, what? And it just it misses the message sometimes. So I think for us, African American, Jamaican, whatever our backgrounds are, is to kind of come from a place of, am I functioning now? How does my life look now since this person is gone? And grief can go, by the way, it doesn't have to be about death. It could be the loss of a friendship. It could be the loss. I mean, there's so much to talk about. We got to talk about that a different day, right?
Yes, but
There's so much there to talk about, and just kind of how are you as the individual processing this? Are you able to move again? And I never want to say move on, right? It's like moving forward,
right.
without that
Yes.
person there,
Yes.
and how are they functioning now? And that's the bottom line.
Yeah. So, I just want to let you know, thank you so much for
Of
everything,
course.
all the information you share. We're going to move forward in the conversation. And before we wrap this up, is there anything that you would like to share? I do know that we connected through her space. So can you tell us a bit about her space?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple different things. I think the original messages came through her happiness clinic, was actually Michelle Talbert. It's her baby, I should say. So there's a location in Lauderhill called Her Power Space. and it's a co-working space, and it's Michelle's space, and it's for typically women, but men show up too, right? And there's office space. You can rent it out for events. You can do you can record your podcast and take pictures, and it's a really pretty space out in Lauderhill. So that's where that part is from. And then there's a Her Happiness Clinic, which is kind of more about talking about this kind of stuff and supporting us emotionally and mentally. And so every month, on the last Friday of the month, we have an event and different topics, right? We did one recently about music and mood and how to kind of incorporate that. And our next one is about touch, like physical touch. And we're going to have a massage therapist there. So you can attend virtually, online on Zoom, or you can actually go to the space in Lauderhill and be there for those. So we do that once a month, and we have book club, and there's so many different things that, Her Power Moves in Her Power Space. Yeah, there's so many different things, but so that's where I kind of came in, because I am on the board for the organization with Michelle, and so she's the one who kind of put me in touch with you guys, and I'm all for a talk about getting us healthy and getting us well, and we're all a part of that for sure. Yeah.
Yes, well, Jacqueline Dawson, I just want to thank you so much for participating.
Absolutely.
It's been an amazing conversation. We can't wait for the viewers to get to see this and to learn something and to listen. And you guys, be sure to tune in and log on to Her Power Space. I believe the Instagram is Her Power Space.
Yeah, or you can even do Her Happiness Clinic, herhappinessclinic.com or herpowermoves.com. They're all under that same umbrella. And then, I am a therapist separately. My company is called Born to Fly, but you can find me on Her Power stuff too, because I'm there at part of it.
And so what is the name of your company?
My company is called Born to Fly, so that's where I do my individual. So that's all my therapy and my evaluations and all that fun stuff. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you.
You got to get some shirts so I can wear your shirt.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen,
work on that.
Thank you so much for tuning in. And Jacqueline, I just want to say thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Remember, this is the Shut Up or Talk Up Wellness Lifestyle brand. We are the Wellness Connectors. We focus on mental health, emotional health, and physical health. And we are getting into the thick of things with our health talk. Thank you for joining in. Bye.